Welcome to episode 175 of the Scarlet Faithful podcast. I'm Aaron Brightman, coming to you on Monday, September 25th. Rainy weekend, rainy starts of the week. Wanted to take this episode and touch on some big picture, the big picture outlook, just in terms of Rutgers for this season with football and beyond. Um, Before I do that, I did want to preface it in terms of sending me emails or messages that, listen, I agree. And I don't think that Greg Schiano and the Rutgers football team is going to worry about the big picture or think about anything in regard to the landscape right now in the Big Ten. They shouldn't, they won't, they don't. They're going to be in Wagner mode, and then they're going to be in Wisconsin mode, and so forth. As fans, we have the luxury to analyze everything, project, look at, speculate, all that, and that's fun. And honestly, I mean, why not look at what's at stake from a macro level, from a big picture level? So that's what I want to do in this episode, and the overall kind of message or point I want to make is that the Big Ten's wide open right now, and it's going to be much less so after this season. So the Big Ten West, and we think this is the last year of divisions. It was announced that way. That was made or announced before Oregon and Washington were announced and added to the conference. But I still think divisions are going to go away. But if this is the last season of the Big Ten West, it is appropriate because they're a disaster right now. Iowa, Wisconsin probably are still the favorites for the division, but because no one wants it. Minnesota lost to Northwestern. I'm glad Ben Bryant threw for 400 yards. Didn't make me look completely insane for being so paranoid about him in week one. And then you have Iowa. The offense is looking pretty bad. Obviously, Penn State, I mean, they could be a college football playoff team, but Iowa looked really bad this weekend. Nebraska struggled. Illinois hasn't looked that great. Wisconsin, we've talked about it a little bit, but they're not. They're certainly. I mean, it's year one of Luke Fickell. They're not the Wisconsin that they've been in years past that we're used to. So the West is wide open. You have Michigan State trending down in the East. You have Indiana barely beating Akron in overtime. I thought they've actually, defensively they've held up pretty well, and they played pretty tough at home this year, but the Akron game was pretty bad. So opportunity is there for Rutgers football. Even despite this loss to Michigan, and we talked about it in the rapid reaction, and the frustrations there, I think the biggest takeaway was that Rutgers looked like they can win 6 games on the way they kind of represented, the way they showed up physically, the way they competed. The missed. It was a different kind of loss, and in a way, it was a good loss, right? And I know you never want to lose, but they weren't completely outclassed, right? They made mistakes. There were bad decisions, but they weren't wiped off the field. They looked like they belonged, and Michigan, they definitely brought their A game in terms of, I mean, they were amped up. And if you see some of the post-game quotes from Michigan players, they were talking about the way they brought it, and they were bullying the bully and all this stuff. I mean, they took Rutgers very seriously, and that is a compliment, and that is progress. And I think that if you look around the Big Ten, just in terms of social media and reporting and media coverage, and there's a lot of power rankings this week already that Rutgers is, they're pretty much, I've seen maybe 5 or 6, and they're either ranked 6th or 7th in those power rankings, in all of them. So the perception of Rutgers is trending up. Good vibes to start the season. Yeah, some of the competition, Virginia Tech's looking pretty lousy. They lost at Marshall. Northwestern did beat Minnesota, a good defense, so that's positive. They're not going to go winless, so that's important from a Rutgers resume perspective. And Rutgers has not only an opportunity to build off of this positive reaction, perception, all that, but they have a real opportunity to get to 6, and who knows, maybe more wins than that. It really could be a breakout year for the program. When not a lot of people expected it, including myself, picked them to go 4-8. Would be thrilled to be completely wrong. But now, you have Wagner. It's an opportunity to get some guys, younger guys, action, some guys that maybe are a little dinged up, get them some rest. And then you go into the critical month of October, right? This season's going to be ultimately, I mean, you can't say ultimately, right? Because if they beat Wagner, which, I mean, if they don't, we have major problems and this conversation should be deleted. But if you even just win one in October, right? You still have 5 wins going into November. A very difficult schedule. You have Ohio State and at Penn State. Those, can't expect those to be wins, but you're at Iowa and you have Maryland at home. Maryland's looking pretty good right now. How much better are they than Rutgers? We don't know. They've had a benefit of they got Michigan State this week. Rutgers got Michigan. If you flip the tables, maybe Rutgers, is sitting at 4-0, and everybody's. I mean, they're a national story at 4-0 and 2-0 in the Big Ten. So there's a little bit of that going on at Iowa. I said in the preseason, I think that's a game that Rutgers has a chance simply because the offense is what it is, not explosive, and Rutgers, as long as they can, not shoot themselves in the foot, not make a lot of mistakes, they could win that game. Believe it even more now. So. Even if they can just get one win in October, you're playing for a bowl game in November. But they do have the chance to become bowl eligible in October, and then November's gravy. If you can get a win in November, then you're talking about, 7 wins? I mean, that would be a massive success, and it would get some real traction across the Big Ten and nationally for the program and for Greg Schiano. Now, the flip side of that is that 2024 and beyond, the Big Ten is going to be even more difficult, even though the East Division is most likely and as of now is definitely going away. If you look at the AP top 25 poll this week, 6 of the top 9 will be in the Big Ten next year. So Oregon, USC, and Washington are all in that 5 to 9 range. I think it's 6, 7, 8 or 6, 7, 9. Excuse me. And Washington, listen, they have Michael Penix Jr. He's a tremendous quarterback. When he leaves, I mean, they'll probably take a step back, but they've been a really good program for a long time now. They were in the playoff under Chris Peterson a few years ago. They could be again this year. They're still good. They're going to be a good program no matter what. And then you have Oregon and USC, which have endless budgets, endless resources. They necessarily haven't been as good as they have been in years past, but they're in an arms race that, Rutgers can't compete with. And they're going to be right there with the Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State in the future. That's 5 marquee programs that are going to spend like it, have the resources for it, are going to recruit like it. And whether they have 10, 11, 12 win seasons every year, they're just at a different level. And they haven't made an announcement about the 24 schedule yet, which, by the way, looking at it today versus August, it's not nearly as daunting as we thought. You have Illinois at home. You have Iowa. You have Minnesota on the road. UCLA is mixed in there, too, with all the other East teams except for Indiana. But my point is, that one of those West teams is dropping off and Rutgers is going to get Oregon or USC. You just know it. That's what's going to happen when they redo the schedule. There are winnable games on that schedule. As of now, looking at it, you hope that Rutgers is better next year with year 2 of Kirk Shiraka as offensive coordinator, with Gavin Wimsatt taking another step forward. The defense, continuing to get better and better. But the schedule is going to be exponentially harder next season and beyond. The Big Ten is just going to be way more competitive than it already is. Doesn't mean Rutgers can't be successful in that Big Ten. But what it does mean is that when you have an opportunity right now in 2023 to get to 6 or more wins because the league is down and you're making progress, that is a huge opportunity that in the grand scheme of things, as fans, we can look at it and say, yeah, this is a moment. This is a moment in Greg Schiano's tenure. This is a moment for the program to take a legitimate step forward, and one in which I think can be not a flash in the pan. It can be a real step forward and a reset of where the program is thought of within the league, national perception, but also where the program takes a foothold in recruiting and just development of the program. Positive momentum would be huge. And if you squander it now and you only get to 5 wins and you don't make a bowl game and you don't get that extra practice time, and then you go into next year with more pressure to make a bowl game when the schedule's going to get harder, and they're at Virginia Tech next year too. It's going to put more pressure on things. It's just going to make they're not going to be there yet. And I'm not saying if they win 6 games they're going to be there all of a sudden, but you're taking a real step forward, and people will recognize that. And the buzz, I think as Rutgers fans, it's easy to, be hyper focused on internally in terms of the details, in terms of the frustrations, all of that. It makes sense, right? But when you take a step back and you look at how the Big Ten fan bases as a whole and the media and people are pretty positive about Rutgers right now. And the team earned that with those 3 wins. Whether the competition was that great or not, it doesn't matter. It's the way in which Rutgers played changed perception. They played winning football. They weren't eking it out. They were beating teams legitimately, significantly. And even our old friend Stewie Mandel wrote this weekend that he was actually impressed with Rutgers against Michigan and that the defense he thought was pretty good. So, if we can get him to write something positive, right, after that whatever that was in the offseason about being the worst realignment move ever, which is, I talked about it last week, how ridiculous that was. That heads are turning. So I get that that's that not a real benefit in terms of getting to a bowl game, like just in terms of, being successful as a program, but perception does matter. And Rutgers has an opportunity to change perception for the better this season. And after a decade of not having a winning season, that is huge and would be a huge narrative changer in the Greg Schiano 2.0 era and would just be massive for the program. And then you're going into 24-25. The Big Ten is going to be even harder, but you have some momentum going into it. Not getting to 6 wins now, even though that wasn't necessarily, of course it was the program's goal, but, fans hoped they get 6 wins, but I think that, and I did this with polls and stuff, 5 and 7 seemed to be the kind of the consensus. A lot of 6 and 6 was a popular pick as well. But if you don't get to 6 and 6 now, right, when you're going 4 and 1, and yes, they're going to beat Wagner. If they don't, then we'll delete this. And, I don't know if I already said that or not. This is a chance, right? The Big Ten is plenty of parity, and you have 4 or 5 games in a row, even though 3 are on the road, at Wisconsin, at Indiana, at Iowa, and then you have Michigan State at home, and then obviously Ohio State, which, they have very little chance. But 4 of those 5 games on paper, you could say Rutgers has a legitimate chance to win and probably will be favored in at least 2. I would say right now they'll be favored against Michigan State at home, and they will probably be favored at Indiana. And who knows if they won at Wisconsin too, and I'm not trying to get crazy here, but if they won all 3, they're definitely going to be favored at Iowa. Wisconsin's certainly the hardest game, I think, of those 4. Luke Fickell, year 1. It could go, listen, Wisconsin could win handily if Rutgers doesn't perform well. But if Rutgers plays hard, which I'm very confident they will, if the game plan makes sense, if they're able to execute that game plan, if they're able to limit mistakes, I think that road game at Michigan is going to help them at Wisconsin, a place they haven't traditionally played well. I think they're going to be better equipped to perform well against a less explosive team for sure. They have a chance. They have a chance. Would I pick them right now? I probably not. But I would be more confident going into Wisconsin than I've ever been with them playing there. And again, fortuitous developments this season, right? And you're playing. This is the most vulnerable Wisconsin's probably ever going to be for Rutgers in the Luke Fickell era. He's a very good coach. Recruiting's going to go up. He's going to get his guys in there. This is, if you want to beat Wisconsin, this is it. This is the chance. Not to say they can't beat them in the future, can't beat them at home, but this is your prime chance in the decade you've been in the Big Ten to beat Wisconsin. Michigan State, we'll see what happens with the redshirt situation. 4 games in now, you might have guys that opt out for that redshirt now without their coach. If the firing does go through, you have a 30-day transfer portal window that opens for Michigan State. So you might listen. We don't know what the roster is going to look like, and it's 3 weeks away. Michigan State visiting Rutgers on homecoming. So who knows what the state of that team is going to be coming in. That's a game I think Rutgers has to win, right? You want to bury Michigan State right now. They're vulnerable, and this is a game that you got to have. And then you go to Indiana. I know they looked pretty bad against Akron. I've talked about, 8th game in 8 weeks. Rutgers has to stay healthy. That's obviously the key to all this, right? You have to stay healthy. You have to keep most of your key guys. And they're getting healthier in respect with, Aaron Young back. The running backs room is as healthy as been. We'll see what Shiano says today, Monday, in terms of any injury updates. But overall, I mean, those are 3 winnable games in October. You get 2, you're bowl eligible a week, 10 days before Halloween and going into your bye week. And then November's gravy, and you got a real chance going to Iowa. And then who knows what Maryland's going to be like at the end of the year. They're not great in the trenches. They have a lot of skill positions. But, Rutgers has caught them with a lot of injuries 2 years ago at the end of the season. Last year, not so much. So much opportunity. You get to a bowl game. You get that extra 3 weeks of practice, 2 weeks, whatever it is. Huge for a program like Rutgers with a development going on. It's a developmental program, per Shiano, and they have a lot of young guys. So that would be huge. And I just think you want to build momentum going into 2024. You don't want 2024. You don't want people writing that it's a make or break year for Shiano. That year 5, he's got to get he's got to get to 6 wins. He hasn't done it yet. You don't want that storyline. You just don't. And they could get to that in 2024. But the way this year has broke so far, the way it is on September 25th, this season, the trajectory has changed. The ceiling is higher. The opportunity is greater. And I think this team is better than we expected. So that's my kind of discussion on it. Did I miss anything? Really fascinated with what the 24 schedule is going to look like when they redo it. I don't know when they're going to announce it, but I will make a prediction. I think Illinois, Minnesota, or Iowa is going to come off the schedule, and Oregon or USC is coming on. That's I think it's going to be Oregon. I think. Hopefully Dana Allman doesn't come. Yeah, check out all those power rankings. Maybe I'll do one this week. We'll see if I have time. Men's basketball practice is starting this week. I got a piece coming out soon today. Check out everything at thescarletfaithful.com. And thank you so much for everyone that sends nice messages, listens, reads, watches, all this. Appreciate it. I'll keep it coming, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.